The day the crate arrived, the sky over Montana was gray and heavy with the promise of rain. Dr. Sam Harlow was in the middle of stitching up a gash on a farmer's old hound dog when his assistant, Lucy Tran, came running through the back door of the clinic with wide eyes and a face drained of color. "Sam," she said, and her voice had a shake in it that made him put down the needle. "There's something outside. Something big." The crate sat in the gravel parking lot behind the clinic. It was not made of wood or metal or anything Sam had ever seen before. It was smooth, dark, and slightly warm to the touch, like the shell of some massive egg. It hummed faintly. Beside it, a small device floated in the air at eye level, projecting a pale blue light. When Sam stepped closer, the light flickered and a face appeared. It was sharp and angular, covered in dark plates like armor, with 4 narrow eyes that gleamed with cold amusement. "Greetings, humans," the face said. The voice was deep and carried a mocking edge that needed no translation. "I am King Voroth of the Zarathi Dominion. I have watched your little species with great interest. You are known across the galaxy for your tenderness, your love of broken things. So I have sent you a gift, a thing befitting your nature." The face smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "Inside this container, you will find a Cathari war dragon, breed designation 7. It was meant for battle, but it arrived defective. A useless thing. Damaged wings, damaged legs, damaged spirit. We were going to destroy it, but then I thought, why waste a perfectly good joke?" Voroth leaned closer in the projection, his 4 eyes bright with pleasure. "Let the humans try to fix it. Let the galaxy watch them fail. Let everyone see what happens when sentiment meets reality." The projection cut out. The device fell to the ground and went dark. Sam and Lucy stood in silence for a long moment. The crate hummed. Something inside it shifted, and the entire crate rocked slightly on the gravel. "Should we call someone?" Lucy asked. "The government, the military, someone?" Sam looked at the crate. He looked at the scorch marks on its surface, the scratches along the bottom edge, where something inside had clawed weakly at the walls. He thought about the hound dog on his table inside, the 3-legged cat sleeping in the recovery room, the blind horse he had nursed back to health last spring in the very barn behind him. "Open it," he said. Lucy stared at him. "Sam, open it, Lucy." She found the release mechanism after a few minutes of careful searching. There was a hiss of pressurized air, and the front panel of the crate slid downward and became a ramp. A smell rolled out, stale, sour, and laced with something metallic that Sam recognized immediately. Old blood, infection, fear. He crouched at the base of the ramp and looked inside. She was curled in the far corner of the crate, pressed so tightly against the wall that her body seemed to be trying to disappear into it. She was about the size of a large horse, but longer, with a tail that wrapped around her body like a shield. Her scales should have been beautiful. Sam could see hints of deep blue and violet beneath the grime, but they were dull and flaking, starved of whatever nutrition kept them bright. Her left wing was folded at an angle that made Sam's stomach turn. It had clearly been broken at some point, and had healed wrong, fused into a permanent twist that would never open fully. Her hind legs were thin and trembled constantly, and she dragged them more than moved them. Burn scars covered her underbelly, in rough, overlapping patches, the kind of scars that came not from one injury, but from many, repeated over time. But it was her eyes that stopped Sam cold. They were large, golden, and filled with a terror so deep and so old that it had become the only thing she knew. She looked at Sam, the way an animal looks at the world when it has learned that the world only brings pain. She did not growl. She did not snap. She did not try to be fierce. She just pressed herself harder into the corner and waited for whatever was going to happen next. Sam had seen that look before. He had seen it in dogs pulled from fighting rings, in horses rescued from neglect, in cats found sealed in boxes on the side of the road. It was the look of a creature that had given up on being saved. He sat down on the ramp, slowly, making himself small. He did not reach toward her. He just sat there and let her see him. "Hey there," he said, keeping his voice low and steady. "You're okay now." She flinched at the sound of his voice, and that flinch told him everything. She had been spoken to before, and it had never meant anything good. Behind him, Lucy was already on her phone, her voice tight and controlled as she made calls to the university, to the Department of Interstellar Affairs, to anyone who might know anything about alien dragon biology. She was scared, Sam could tell, but she was also angry, and Lucy's anger was the useful kind, the kind that got things done. Somewhere out in the galaxy, King Vorath was broadcasting this moment to millions of viewers. The cameras embedded in the crate were transmitting everything: the small parking lot, the plain brick clinic, the tired man in a flannel shirt sitting on a ramp talking softly to a broken dragon. Vorath's court was laughing. Betting pools were opening across dozens of worlds. How long before the human gives up? How long before the creature dies? How long before sentiment crumbles under the weight of reality? The Zarathi gave it 3 days. The Pelori gave it a week. A species from the Outer Rim, who had once been conquered by the Zarathi themselves, gave it 2 weeks and added a note: "Humans are strange, but they are still small." None of them understood what they were looking at. None of them understood what it meant when Sam Harlow sat on that ramp for 2 hours without moving, letting a trembling dragon get used to the sound of his breathing. None of them understood what Lucy meant when she hung up the phone, grabbed a blanket from the supply closet, and laid it gently at the dragon's feet. Not close enough to threaten, just close enough to offer. None of them understood, because none of them had ever seen mercy that asked for nothing in return. And in the far corner of a dark crate, on a small planet that the galaxy considered insignificant, a broken dragon named Vessel 7 smelled the wool of the blanket, felt the absence of pain for the first time in her short life, and did something she had never done before. She closed her eyes and slept. The first week nearly broke him. Sam moved a cot into the barn behind the clinic, the same barn where he had nursed the blind horse, and a dozen other animals that the world had decided were not worth saving. He padded the floor with thick rubber mats and covered them with straw. He hung old blankets over the windows to dim the light, because every time a beam of sun hit Ember's eyes, he had started calling her Ember after noticing a faint orange glow in her throat when she was calm, she would flinch and press herself flat against the ground. She did not eat for 4 days. Sam tried everything: raw meat, cooked meat, fish, grain, fruit, nutrient paste he ordered from the university overnight. She would smell each offering, then turn her head away and stare at the wall. On the 3rd day, Lucy found a galactic database entry that mentioned Cathari war dragons were often starved as a form of discipline, trained to eat only when commanded. Ember was not refusing food because she was not hungry. She was refusing because no one had told her she was allowed. Sam sat beside the bowl of nutrient paste that night. He did not push it toward her. He just ate his own dinner, a sandwich, sitting on the barn floor 3 feet from the bowl, chewing quietly. Ember watched him. He could feel her golden eyes on him, tracking every movement of his hand to his mouth. After a long time, she stretched her neck forward, just barely, and touched the edge of the paste with her tongue. She pulled back immediately, waiting. When nothing happened, no shock, no shout, no strike, she leaned forward again and ate. Slowly, carefully, like someone walking across ice, waiting for it to crack. Sam kept eating his sandwich and said nothing. On the 5th day, he called Dr. Nora Whitfield at the University of Colorado. Nora was a xenobiologist, one of the few humans who had spent years studying alien species from whatever data the galactic community made available, which was not much. She arrived at the clinic the next morning in a dusty sedan, with a trunk full of scanning equipment and a look on her face that was equal parts curiosity and dread. She spent 6 hours scanning Ember, while Sam kept the dragon calm with a steady hand on her snout. What Nora found made her sit down on an overturned bucket and press her hands against her face. "They engineered her pain receptors," Nora said, her voice flat in the way that voices go flat when someone is trying very hard not to scream. "She has roughly 10 times the pain sensitivity of a normal creature her size. It's deliberate. It's a control mechanism. If she disobeys, even a mild correction would feel like agony. She's been living in pain her entire life, Sam. Constant, low-level pain, every single day." Then he said, "What can we do about it?" "I can formulate a pain management protocol. It won't fix the underlying engineering, but it can dull the signal. Give her some relief. Do it, today." The first time Ember received the pain treatment, something changed in her eyes. It was subtle, a softening, a loosening of something that had been clenched tight for as long as she had been alive. She let out a long, slow breath through her nostrils, and the faint orange glow in her throat brightened for a moment, before settling into a steady, warm pulse. Lucy, watching from the barn doorway, had to go into the supply room and close the door behind her. Sam heard her crying through the wall and said nothing because he understood. There are moments when kindness, real kindness, the kind that costs something, is almost too much to witness. Sam woke at 5, checked Ember's vitals, adjusted her bedding, administered her pain medication, and offered her food. He spoke to her constantly. Not commands, just talk. He told her about the weather, about the hound dog that was healing nicely, about the barn cats that kept sneaking in to sleep near her because she was warm. He told her about his life, about growing up on a ranch, about his mother who had taught him that every living thing deserved dignity, even the ones that could not ask for it. Ember listened. He could tell because her eyes followed him, and the glow in her throat would pulse gently when his voice was calm. She began to move more, dragging herself around the barn to explore corners, sniffing at the blankets, nosing at the barn cats, with a gentleness that seemed impossible for a creature her size. She was careful with them, so careful, as if she understood that small things could be hurt easily, and she did not want to be the one who hurt them. The galactic audience continued to watch. Vorath's court checked in weekly, expecting to find failure. A dead dragon, a broken human, proof that mercy was a waste. Instead, they found a man in rubber boots, spooning nutrient paste into a bowl at 3 in the morning, while a dragon with a twisted wing rested her heavy head on his knee. The comments on the galactic broadcast began to shift. At first, most of them had been jokes, humans playing doctor with a war machine. How cute, how pointless. But as the weeks passed, the jokes became fewer. In their place came questions. "Why does he not sleep?" a Talari observer asked. "He does," another replied. "In the barn, on a cot, next to the creature." "Why?" "Because it is afraid of the dark." That exchange was shared across 14 star systems in a single day. A Pelori scientist who had spent her career studying interspecies bonding published a short paper titled "On the Human Tendency Toward Irrational Attachment," and then, 3 weeks later, retracted it and published a new one titled "On the Human Tendency Toward Extraordinary Commitment." Sam did not know about any of this. He did not watch the broadcasts. He did not read the galactic forums. He was too busy. Ember had started trying to stand, and her hind legs kept buckling, and he needed to design a support system, and Nora was coming back with new scan results, and the barn cats had gotten into the nutrient paste again, and there was still a whole clinic full of earth animals that needed him too. One night, about 3 weeks in, Sam was sitting on his cot, reading a veterinary journal by lamplight. "Ember," was lying on her padded mat a few feet away, her breathing slow and even. He thought she was asleep. Then he felt something warm and heavy rest against his leg. He looked down and saw that she had stretched out her neck and laid her head against his knee, the way a dog might, the way an animal does when it has decided that a person is safe. He put his hand on her snout, very gently. She did not flinch. "There you go," he whispered. "There you go." Outside, the Montana sky was full of stars, and somewhere among them, an empire that had thrown this creature away like garbage was beginning, very slowly, to realize that it had made a terrible mistake. Not because the joke had failed, but because the joke had revealed something about the Zarathi that they had never wanted to see, and something about humanity that they had never thought to look for. Ember's throat glowed softly in the dark barn, warm and steady, like a coal that someone had finally, after a long and brutal winter, bothered to blow back to life. By the second month, word had spread far beyond the galactic broadcast. It had spread across Earth, too. Sam's clinic, which had always been a quiet place at the end of a dirt road, now had news vans parked along the fence and reporters calling every hour. Lucy handled all of it with a firm hand and a single statement that she repeated to every journalist, every government official, and every curious neighbor who wandered too close to the barn. "He's busy. She's healing. Leave them alone." Sam needed help, and he knew it. Ember was getting stronger. The pain management protocol was working. She was eating on her own now, regularly and eagerly, and Nora had adjusted her diet based on new scans that showed her body was slowly repairing itself in ways that surprised even Nora. But Ember still could not walk properly. Her hind legs had partial function, enough to drag herself around the barn, but not enough to stand or move with any real freedom. And her wing, that broken, twisted wing, hung at her side like a reminder of everything that had been done to her. Sam called Dr. Kyle Brennan. Kyle was a biomechanical engineer who had made a name for himself building prosthetics and mobility devices for injured wildlife. He had designed leg braces for eagles, a tail prosthetic for a dolphin, and a wheeled harness for a wolf that had lost the use of its back legs after a spinal injury. He was brilliant, stubborn, and had a habit of talking to his machines the way other people talk to pets. He arrived at the clinic on a Tuesday afternoon, took one look at Ember, and was quiet for a very long time. Then he crouched down, studied her legs, studied her wing, pulled out a notebook, and started sketching. "I've built braces for eagles," he said, not looking up. "I've built harnesses for dolphins. A dragon is just a scaling problem." It was not, of course, just a scaling problem. Cathari biology was unlike anything Kyle had ever worked with. The bones were denser, the joints moved in ways that made no anatomical sense by Earth standards, and the muscles were layered in a pattern that Nora described as efficient but nightmarish. Kyle went through 6 prototypes in 7 weeks. The first one was too rigid, and Ember would not let it near her. The second was too heavy. The third fit well, but collapsed under her weight the first time she tried to stand. The fourth, fifth, and sixth each got closer, each one refined with data from Nora's scans and feedback from Sam, who knew Ember's body language better than anyone. The 7th prototype was the one. It was a lightweight frame made of a composite material that Kyle had developed himself, fitted to Ember's hind legs and lower spine with padding at every contact point. It did not replace her legs, it supported them, taking enough of the load that her own muscles could do the rest. It moved with her, not against her, and it was designed to be adjusted as she grew stronger. The morning they fitted it, Sam, Lucy, Nora, and Kyle stood in the barn, trying to keep their breathing steady and their expectations in check. Ember sniffed the brace carefully, looked at Sam, and made the low rumbling sound, the purr, that she had started making when she felt safe. Sam stroked her snout and said, "You're all right. Try it." She shifted her weight. The brace held. She shifted again, tentatively, and her hind legs straightened beneath her. She wobbled. Kyle held his breath. Sam placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and warm. She pushed. And she stood. Not perfectly, not gracefully. She swayed, and her twisted wing hung loose, and her legs trembled inside the frame. On her own, in a sunlit barn in Montana. On a planet that was supposed to be too small and too soft to matter. A creature that had been bred for war and thrown away like waste was standing upright and looking at the world from above for the first time. She took one step, then another, then two more, slow and careful, across the padded floor of the barn, while straw crunched under the frame and the barn cats scattered and regrouped in confused curiosity. 4 steps. Sam counted every one. He turned away so no one would see his face, but Lucy saw it anyway, and Nora saw it, and Kyle saw it, and none of them said a word, because there was nothing to say that the moment had not already said for itself. The galactic broadcast captured everything. The viewership had grown from thousands to millions to something that no one was bothering to count anymore. Beings from 100 worlds watched a dragon take 4 steps, and something strange happened across the network. A wave of silence. Not boredom, not mockery, just silence. The kind that falls when a large number of people witness something that forces them to rethink what they believed. The comments that followed were different from before. A Telleri commander wrote, "I have led armies across star systems, and I have never seen anything as brave as those 4 steps. A Pelleri elder posted, "We were told the humans were sentimental fools. We were not told that their sentiment could move mountains." An anonymous user from an unregistered system wrote simply, "I want to be the kind of person who would sit in a barn for 3 weeks so a broken thing could learn to sleep." And then there was the message that arrived quietly at the clinic's public email address, buried among hundreds of others, from a sender identified only by a Zarathi military code. It read, "My name is Dren. I am a soldier of the Zarathi Dominion. I have served King Vorath for 30 cycles. I have seen our war dragons bred, trained, broken, and discarded. I have never questioned it before. No one has ever treated one of ours the way you treat this one. We do not treat our own this way. I do not understand your kind, but I think I would like to." Sam read the message at his kitchen table that evening, while Ember slept in the barn, the barn cats pressed against her warm belly, the glow in her throat pulsing gently with each breath. He read it twice, then forwarded it to Nora without comment. Nora read it, sat at her desk for a long time, and then called Sam. "This is bigger than a dragon," she said. "I know," Sam replied. "What do we do?" "Same thing we've been doing. We take care of her." Meanwhile, King Vorath was losing control of his own joke. His advisors showed him the viewership numbers, the shifting sentiment, the fact that his name was now associated not with strength and dominance, but with cruelty and waste. They urged him to issue a statement, to reframe the narrative, to recall the dragon before the damage deepened. Vorath refused. His pride was a wall, and he would not let a small man on a small planet make him look like he had been wrong. Instead, he sent a second broadcast, delivered with the same cold amusement as the first, though those who knew him well could see something harder behind his 4 gleaming eyes. "The humans grow attached to a broken weapon," he said. "How predictable, how fragile. When it dies, and it will, they will learn what we already know. Mercy is weakness, sentiment is a trap, and broken things belong in the ground." Sam watched the broadcast on his phone, standing in the barn doorway. Ember was behind him, lying on her mat, the brace resting beside her, the barn cats curled against her side. He put the phone in his pocket, walked over to her, checked her water, adjusted the padding on her mat, and sat down next to her. She rested her head on his knee. The glow in her throat was warm and steady. "He doesn't know you," Sam said quietly, "but I do." Outside, the stars turned slowly over Montana, and somewhere among them, a soldier named Dren looked at the sky of his own world and wondered for the first time in his life if everything he had been taught about strength was wrong. 6 months after the crate landed in Sam's parking lot, King Vorath announced that he would come to Earth. He called it a diplomatic visit. He called it a routine inspection of Zerathi property. But everyone who watched the announcement, from the lowest clerk on the Galactic Council to the most distant farming colony on the Rim, understood what it really was. It was a king coming to take back what was his, because the joke had stopped being funny a long time ago, and now it was something else entirely, something that made Vorath's throne feel less steady than it had in centuries. Earth's government reacted the way governments do when an alien king with a war fleet announces a personal visit. There were emergency meetings, urgent calls, committees formed and dissolved within hours. Deputy Director Claire Dawson, from the Department of Interstellar Affairs, called Sam directly. "Harlow," she said, and her voice carried the careful, measured tone of someone delivering very bad news. "King Vorath will be arriving in 11 days. He is bringing a military escort. He intends to reclaim the dragon. I'm calling to advise you to cooperate fully and to begin preparing the creature for transfer." Sam was in the barn when he took the call. Ember was standing in her brace, nosing at a bucket of water, while one of the barn cats sat on her back, like it owned the place. Her scales had regained much of their color over the past months, deep blues and violets that caught the light and shifted like oil on water. She had gained weight. Her eyes, once filled with nothing but old terror, now held curiosity, warmth, and something that Sam could only describe as personality. She liked mornings. She did not like loud trucks. She was fascinated by birds, and would watch them through the barn door for hours. She made the purring sound when Sam scratched the ridge behind her jaw. And she made a different sound, a low, soft hum, when Lucy read aloud from veterinary journals during her lunch break, as if the sound of a calm voice was a kind of music to her. She was not a weapon. She was not property. She was a living being who had learned, slowly and painfully, that the world did not have to hurt. "She's not property," Sam said into the phone. "She's my patient. And she's not going anywhere she doesn't want to go." Claire Dawson was quiet for a moment. "Dr. Harlow, I understand your attachment, but this is an interstellar diplomatic matter. King Vorath has legal claim under galactic trade statutes. She's not a trade good. She's a living creature that was tortured, discarded, and dumped on my doorstep as a joke. If Vorath wants to discuss her future, he can come talk to me. But she stays here until she decides otherwise." Someone in the department leaked Sam's words to the press, and within hours, his statement was circling the galactic network. "She stays here until she decides otherwise." It became the most shared sentence in the history of interspecies communication. It was translated into 400 languages. It was carved into a stone monument on a Pelori colony world before the week was out. Vorath arrived on a gray Tuesday, the kind of day where the clouds sat low over the mountains and the air smelled like wet earth. His shuttle was enormous, black and angular, and it landed in the open field beside Sam's clinic, with a sound like thunder rolling across the valley. Behind it, in orbit, 3 Zerathi warships hung in the sky like dark moons, visible even in daylight. War dragons, real ones, fully grown, armored, and terrible, circled in formation above the field, their wing beats shaking the windows of the clinic. It was meant to remind Earth of its place. Sam was adjusting Ember's leg brace when the shuttle landed. He looked up at the sound, then looked back down and finished tightening the strap. Lucy stood beside him with her clipboard, her jaw set. Nora was reviewing medical charts at a folding table she had set up in the barn. Kyle was calibrating a new joint mechanism for the brace, a screwdriver between his teeth. None of them went outside to greet the king. Vorath came to them. He walked across the field, with 4 armored guards, each one nearly as tall as he was. He was enormous up close, 9 feet of dark chitin and dense muscle, 4 eyes that scanned everything with the cold precision of a predator assessing prey. He moved like something that had never been challenged, never been questioned, never been told no. He stopped at the barn door and looked down at Sam. "You are the animal doctor," he said. His voice was deep, resonant, and carried a weight that seemed to press against the walls. "Veterinarian," Sam said. He did not look up from the brace. Vorath's eyes narrowed. He was not used to being corrected. He was not used to being ignored. He stepped into the barn, and his guards moved to follow. But Ember made a sound, a low, rumbling growl that was not aggressive, but was clearly a warning, and Sam held up a hand. "Just you," Sam said to Vorath. "She doesn't like crowds." The king of the Zarathi Dominion, conqueror of 11 star systems, commander of the largest war fleet in the galaxy, dismissed his guards with a gesture and entered a barn in Montana, alone. He looked at Ember, and for the first time, the galaxy, still watching through the remaining broadcast sensors, saw Vorath hesitate. The dragon he had thrown away was standing. Her scales shimmered. Her eyes were clear and alert. She wore a brace on her hind legs that let her move with a slow, careful dignity. She was not cowering. She was not trembling. She looked at Vorath the way one looks at a stranger, with caution, but without fear. Then she turned away from him and pressed her flank against Sam's side, not hiding, choosing. "She chose," Sam said quietly. "That's what you didn't plan for. You gave her to someone who would let her choose." Vorath stared at the dragon for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was lower, stripped of its performance. "She is Zarathi property. She was bred in our facilities, from our genetic stock, for our purposes. She belongs to the Dominion." "She belongs to herself," Sam said. "Come here. I want to show you something." What followed was not a battle. There were no speeches, no threats, no dramatic standoffs. Sam walked Vorath through 6 months of medical records. He showed him Nora's scans, the engineered pain receptors, the deliberate cruelty wired into Ember's biology. He showed him footage of her first days in the crate, the way she had pressed herself into the corner, the way she had flinched at every sound. He showed him the footage of her first steps in the brace, the 4 careful steps across the barn floor. He showed him everything, calmly, thoroughly, the way a doctor presents a case to someone who needs to understand what happened to a patient. "You built her to suffer," Sam said, and his voice was steady, but there was iron underneath it. "You designed her so that every moment of her life would hurt. And when she broke under that pain, you threw her away and called her useless. That's not strength. That's just laziness. Real strength would have been taking care of her." Vorath said nothing. His 4 eyes moved across the charts, the scans, the images. His massive hands hung at his sides. Outside the barn, a small crowd had gathered. Reporters, neighbors, a few government officials who had driven up from the city. And among them, standing quietly at the back, a Zarathi soldier in unmarked clothing. Dren had traveled across the galaxy in a cargo freighter, using leave he had not been granted, to stand in a Montana field and watch his king look at something he had never bothered to see before. He was not the only one. Scattered through the crowd were a dozen other Zarathi, soldiers and workers, and even one low-ranking court official, all of whom had made quiet, unauthorized journeys to this small corner of Earth. They said nothing. They asked for nothing. They just watched, because something was happening here that their people had never had a word for, and they needed to see it with their own eyes. Vorath stood in the barn, surrounded by evidence of his own cruelty, and the galaxy held its breath. "I will consider your position," he said at last, and his voice sounded like something heavy settling into place. He turned and walked out of the barn without another word. His guards fell in behind him. The shuttle lifted off. The war dragons wheeled overhead, and the warships in orbit shifted but did not fire, did not threaten, did not do anything at all. Sam watched the shuttle disappear into the gray sky. Then he went back inside, gave Ember a scratch behind her jaw ridge, and started preparing her evening meal. Lucy looked at him from across the barn. "Do you think he'll come back?" Sam considered the question. "I think something just broke in him," he said. "Whether he fixes it or not, that's up to him." 3 weeks after Vorath left Montana, the Galactic Council received a formal notice from the Zerathi Dominion. It was short, written in the dry language of interstellar law, and it said simply that the Dominion was relinquishing its claim on the Ketheri war dragon, designated Vessel 7. No explanation was given. No conditions were attached. The document was stamped with Vorath's personal seal and filed without ceremony. When the news reached Sam, he was in the barn, replacing the padding on Ember's leg brace. Lucy read the message aloud from her phone. Sam listened, nodded once, and went back to work. Ember, who was busy investigating a beetle that had crawled across her mat, did not seem to notice that her legal status in the galaxy had just changed. She was more interested in the beetle. But Sam did not stop there, and this was the part that no one expected. Not the Galactic Council, not the Zerathi, not Earth's government, not even his own team. Because Sam Harlow was a veterinarian, and veterinarians do not think about one patient when there are thousands more suffering. He sent a message to Vorath through the interstellar diplomatic channel. It was simple, direct, and written in the plain language that Sam used for everything. It said, "You have thousands of dragons like Ember, war breeds, discards, broken ones. I can't save all of them from here, but I can teach your people how to care for them. If you're willing to learn, I'm willing to come." The message sat unanswered for 9 days. During those 9 days, Sam went about his work. He treated a collie with a broken leg. He vaccinated a herd of cattle for a rancher outside of town. He sat with Ember in the evenings and watched the barn cats climb over her like she was a warm, scaly mountain. He did not check for a reply. He had made the offer. The rest was not up to him. On the 10th day, the reply came. It was not from Vorath's court, or his diplomats, or his military. It was from Vorath himself, and it contained a single word in Zerathi script that Nora translated as something between "come" and "show me." Lucy looked at Sam when he told her. "You're going to alien space," she said, "to teach dragon soldiers how to be gentle." "That's about the size of it," Sam said. "You're insane." "Probably." She paused. "I'm coming with you." Sam, Lucy, Nora, and Kyle departed Earth 6 weeks later on a Pelori transport vessel that had been offered free of charge. The Pelori ambassador had personally arranged it, saying only that it was the least his people could do for a species that had made the galaxy think twice. They arrived in Zerathi space and found exactly what Sam had expected. The Dominion's dragon breeding facilities were vast, cold, and efficient in the way that factories are efficient. Everything optimized for output, nothing designed for the well-being of the creatures inside. The dragons were kept in bare metal stalls. They were fed on strict schedules by automated systems. They were trained through pain, punished for failure, and discarded when they broke. The ones that could not fight were stored in holding pens at the back of the facilities, dozens of them, waiting for disposal. Some had been waiting for years. Sam walked through the holding pens on his first day and did not speak for a long time. Lucy walked beside him, and her face had the expression it got when her anger was building into something sharp and useful. Nora documented everything with quiet, clinical precision. Kyle looked at the twisted limbs and fused wings and started sketching in his notebook before they had even left the first pen. He had been reassigned. Some said punished, some said promoted, depending on who was telling the story, to serve as the human team's guide and translator. He was tall, armored like all Zarathi, and carried himself with the rigid posture of a career soldier. But his eyes, when he looked at the dragons in the holding pens, held something that Sam recognized. It was the look of someone who had always known that something was wrong, but had never been given permission to say so. "Where do we start?" Dren asked on the first morning. "Pain management," Sam said. "Same as with Ember. We deal with the pain first, everything else comes after." The work was brutal. The Zarathi military resisted at every turn. Commanders questioned why resources should be spent on broken dragons. Officials argued that the breeding programs were essential to national defense. Some openly mocked the humans, calling them soft, calling their methods sentimental nonsense. One high-ranking general told Sam to his face that he was wasting everyone's time. Sam looked at the general calmly and said, "Your best war dragons have a combat lifespan of 4 years before they break down. Ours, Ember, is healthier at 8 months of care than any dragon in your facility. You're not breeding weapons, you're breeding suffering, and suffering is inefficient." The general had no answer for that. Efficiency was a language the Zarathi understood. Progress came slowly, measured in small changes that most people would not notice. A padding added to a metal stall. A feeding schedule adjusted to allow the dragons to eat at their own pace. A pain protocol implemented in one facility, then 2, then 5. Kyle designed braces and mobility aids adapted for different dragon breeds, each one built with the same principle he had used for Ember. Nora trained Zarathi scientists in diagnostic techniques that focused on the animal's experience, not just its combat readiness. Lucy organized supply chains, managed logistics, and kept everyone on schedule with the same firm efficiency she had brought to Sam's clinic. And Sam did what Sam always did. He sat with the dragons. He spoke to them. He let them smell his hands and learned that touch did not have to mean pain. He was patient in a way that baffled the Zarathi, because patience in their culture was seen as a form of weakness. But they watched him, and they saw the results, and slowly, very slowly, some of them began to try it themselves. Dren was the first. Sam found him one evening sitting on the floor of a holding pen, speaking quietly to a young dragon with a scarred face and one blind eye. The dragon was leaning against Dren's armored side, and Dren was resting a massive hand on its head with a gentleness that looked almost painful, as if he was using muscles he had never known he had. He looked up when Sam entered and said, "I do not know if I am doing this correctly." "You're doing it fine," Sam said. The first Zarathi veterinary clinic was established 4 months after the human team arrived. It was small, underfunded, and staffed by Zarathi soldiers who had volunteered for duty that most of their peers considered beneath them. But it was there, and it was real, and the dragons that passed through it came out different. Not fixed, not perfect, but better. Cared for, seen. Sam and his team returned to Earth after 7 months in Zarathi space. They were tired, thinner, and changed in ways that would take years to fully understand. When they landed in Montana, Ember was waiting in the field beside the clinic. Kyle had built her a glider rig before they left. A lightweight frame that attached to her body and caught the wind, letting her coast on the thermals that rolled through the valley on clear days. She could not fly. She would never fly. But she could glide, and she did. And watching her drift above the Montana grasslands with her blue and violet scales catching the sun was the kind of sight that made people stop what they were doing and just look. Sam stood on his porch with a cup of coffee and watched her come in for a landing, clumsy and graceful at the same time. the barn cats scattering as she touched down, and then immediately trotting back to press against her warm belly. 1 month later, a private message arrived at the clinic. It was from Vorath. It was not broadcasted. It was not shared with the council or the press or anyone. It was meant only for Sam, and it read, "I meant to teach the galaxy that mercy was foolish. You taught me that cruelty is. I do not know if I am wise enough to change, but I know that I was wrong. That is enough for now." Sam read the message. He sat with it for a while. Then he put on his boots, walked across the yard to the barn, and checked on Ember's water. The way he did every evening, the way he would do every evening for as long as she needed him. The galaxy did not change overnight. It never does. Vorath did not become a kind ruler. The Zarathi did not abandon their war dragons, or dismantle their breeding programs. Change, real change, is slow and uneven and full of setbacks, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something. But in small clinics on distant worlds, in holding pens where a hand rested gently on a scarred head for the first time, in the quiet choice of a soldier to sit on a cold floor and speak softly to a broken creature, something had shifted. A crack had formed in a wall that the galaxy had always believed was solid, and through that crack a little light was getting in. And it had all started with a tired man in a flannel shirt, kneeling at the edge of a dark crate, looking at a trembling dragon that the universe had given up on, and saying 5 words that no one in the galaxy had ever thought to say to something so broken. "You're okay now."